In 2008, California rock band Weezer released their third self-titled album, The Red Album. Track 3 of that record is a nostalgic journey down a music-filled memory lane of the upbringing and formative years of frontman Rivers Cuomo in a ballad called Heart Songs. The lyrics culminate in his own experience of turning all of the musical influences of his life into his own opportunity to write, record, and perform music that went on to impact and inspire others. This podcast, similarly, traces the impact of music as it has highlighted and even inspired the life experiences of its guests. My name is Adam Blaylock. Welcome to Heart Songs, the podcast. This week on Heart Songs, the podcast, please enjoy musician and stand-up comedian Phil Johnson.
Gordon Lightfoot sang a song about a boat that's sank in the lake at the break of the morning. A cat named Steve.
Well, okay, let's get into this here. I was very lucky to grow up with a lot of different kinds of music around me. I grew up in the car listening to my parents' 50s and 60s rock music. My dad was a folk singer in his army days, so I was exposed to some of that type of stuff when he would sing us to sleep tonight when we were kids. I played classical music for solid 15, 20 years as a flautist, and so I had a ton of classical music around me. I ended up with a degree in jazz guitar, so I've had a very broad experience with music, which I try to bring into everything that I do as well, but there are definitely some recurring themes that pop up along the way. So as to this first one about a song that I grew up with and means something to me and has stuck with me to this day. My parents had and have still a jukebox. It's a 1968 Wurlitzer, one of those great old school jukeboxes that we had for my whole childhood. And it's absolutely just filled with songs. And we used to listen to that jukebox at every chance we got, and there was tons of stuff in there. We were listening to Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry and things like that. There was even some comedy stuff in there like Ajax Liquor Store by Hudson and Landry that probably somewhere stuck in my comedy brain as a writer. But the one that really comes to mind is House of the Rising Sun by the Animals, which came out in 1964.
There is a house in New Orleans they call the rising sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy.
And to this day, I think Eric Burdon is still one of the greatest rock singers of all time. He recorded that when he was only 23 years old. They did it in one take, and it is so full of pain and anguish, and the story behind it is just timeless. It's like a time capsule that has transcended time. It is the story of don't go get in trouble, because that's where trouble is, and you're going to be in trouble if you go get in trouble. Like you can ruin your life by doing the wrong things. The song itself, nobody knows who wrote it. It's been in America since at least 1905. It was probably in Europe before that under some other name, and the location was probably in England and not in New Orleans as the modern American version is. But it's just such a captivating piece of music. It was most of the time, I think, done in 4/4, the Animals version in 6/8. So that was a little bit different, and it's just got this swing to it. And I would listen to that song every chance I got. And when I learned how to play this, I can remember annoying the hell out of my girlfriend just playing that song over and over years and years later when we moved in together. And she would be like, just stop, please play something else. But I love the song so much, and I will still play it to this day. And one very vivid memory I have is when my band Roadside Attraction had our first big opening gig for like a big national act. We were opening for Gilby Clarke right after he left Guns N' Roses, and in our set at the time, we were doing House of the Rising Sun. And it was like, might have been our closer even. And we launched into it, and we saw Gilby and his band, plus the other middle act band, come out and just were like, they loved our performance. They were riveted by it. I took my guitar solo and they like applauded me. And it was one of the most validating things for a young musician to get, is to have the headliner and his band walk out on stage. or walk out to, the side stage and appreciate what we were doing with this song that we all sort of all loved. And so, yeah, House of the Rising Sun, that one always comes back into my brain at random times, and it's still a fun one to play. There was another one that's a little more, I guess, in line with what I do now as a comedy musician. There was a guy named Bob Rivers, and he put out an album called Twisted Christmas that was all sort of skewered Christmas carols. And I don't even remember what year it came out, but I was a kid, and it was just one of those things where, I mean, I guess if I had to pick a song off of that album, it would be Wreck the Malls.
Wreck the malls with my friend Charlie. Pride who came out on it.
Wreck the Malls with my friend Charlie, right? And it was dumb, it was ridiculous, but at the same time, it was subversive. It was my first encounter with being able to take something that was sacred, like a Christmas carol, whether actually sacred or secular, but sacred piece of music, and sort of destroy it and turn it into something else. And that felt subversive to me. It felt like you could put that album on at the family Christmas gathering and somebody would tell you to turn it off because it was obnoxious. And that has always been something that appeals to me in music, not something that's obviously not obnoxious. It's something that is only obnoxious if you're actually paying attention to it. And otherwise, it would just kind of sit in the background and you wouldn't even notice it's there. And that sort of subversive obnoxiousness and discomfort has always appealed to me, both on a music and a comedy level, to the point one night I was doing a show and one of the opening acts was sitting in the front row, and he wasn't laughing at anything I was saying, none of my jokes, but he was just really concentrated on what I was doing. And afterwards he walked up to me and he said, "You enjoy making the audience feel uncomfortable, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And so that's always been something that I can trace right back to Bob Rivers singing Wreck the Malls and, just skewering these Christmas carols, in that it was just something that in theory you weren't supposed to do, but it turned out to be kind of harmless when you did it. And it was a little bit uncomfortable for some people to actually hear it. And so thank you, Bob Rivers. And also go see his son, Andrew Rivers, who's a great comedian.
These are the songs I keep singing. Quiet Riot got me started with the banging of my head. Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and Slayer.
So the second song, well, that's already two, but tell me, let's see, a song you discovered when you figured out what genre of music you like and would end up listening to the most. Yeah, and like I said, I've been through so many different types of music over the years, just classical and jazz and classic rock and metal and hard rock, and I love like old jazz. Like I can remember a very pivotal time when I was a young guitarist, a young metal guitarist, shredding my way through my scales, and I happened across a 60 Minutes episode that was they had gone up into the Appalachian Mountains, and they were talking to the people that live up there, and they talked to some bluegrass musicians who just started playing. They're playing on a porch, and it was like faster than any metal song I'd ever heard. And I can remember just being absolutely blown away by the speed and the technique of those bluegrass players. That got me into bluegrass music. And so I have so much in my background, but I have a theory that whatever you are listening to at the ages of 13, 14, you're stuck with that forever. You can transcend it. You can find your way to other places, but you have to do some work to get away from whatever it was that you were listening to at ages 13 or 14. And so I have that too. In 1986, Poison's first album, Look What the Cat Dragged In, came out, and they had a song on the radio called Talk Dirty to Me. And that's what I was listening to at the time. I was just a radio kid listening to rock radio, pop radio. I didn't have taste yet. I was just, being bombarded with whatever the mainstream wanted me to hear. And when Talk Dirty to Me came on, it was so different from the rest of the MOR rock stuff, the Foreigner, the Journey, it was okay. But Talk Dirty to Me came on, and it was energetic. It was raw. It was dirty. It was something that you wouldn't have expected to hear on the radio, and definitely would not have in any earlier time than that, probably. And that was the song that made me want to pick up a guitar. Now, I had a mentor probably 15 years later, 10, 15 years later in the music industry, a guy named Tim Sweeney, who was one of the people responsible for breaking Poison as a major act. And I told him one day, I said, Tim, Talk Dirty to Me by Poison. Poison is the reason I picked up a guitar. And he said, I'm sorry. And that kind of sums it up, because when you listen back now, not a great song, not a great album, but that's at the time my 13-year-old brain lit up. And that was what made me put down my flute, at least for a little while, and go steal my dad's acoustic guitar and start banging away on that. And that's where I ended up. Another one that came up in that same time period, I had a neighbor up the street. There was a girl named Pam who was a couple years older than me, and I would walk behind Pam on the way to school each day as we were walking down the street. We never spoke. I don't think I ever officially met her, but Pam had a mohawk, and Pam had a denim vest with Rock Band patches on it. And so I would walk behind Pam and I would take note of the bands that were on her patches. And she had Metallica and Slayer and, all the Crocus. Crocus was the only one she let me down on. Terrible band. But I ended up at some point buying an album from every band on Pam's vest. And the first one that I bought was Motley Crue's Girls, 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 which came out in 1987. So I was 14 at the time. And I bought it sight unseen. I didn't know what was on it. I just knew that Motley Crue's logo was on Pam's vest. So it must be cool because she had a mohawk. And so I bought this album sight unseen. I put the track on. The first track is called Wild Side. And again, it sounds dated and hokey and cheesy and super, mid-'80s LA Sunset Strip rock now. But at the time, it felt like something I shouldn't be listening to. It felt dangerous. It felt like the underworld. And it was heavy. And it was slightly scary to listen to. And I think that's not something that we can even get out of music anymore. I don't think there's a way to shock anybody with music anymore. You could put the heaviest, nastiest punk rock, death metal, blah on, and nobody's going to be really shocked by it. They may not like it. They might go, hey, turn that noise off. But nobody is shocked anymore by music. I think we've done everything that we can do to be shocking in music. And in 1987, Wild Side was shocking to my 14-year-old brain, and it felt dangerous. And then that's where I decided to go with comedy as well, with that same story. I'd like to make the audience feel uncomfortable a little bit, and then let them turn the corner and see that things are going to be okay. We're on the right side of things, but it's going to be a little uncomfortable getting there. Another one that really came up from those years was in 1987, I got a Christmas gift from my parents that I did not ask for. And it was a vinyl copy of Prince's Sign of the Times. And I don't know why they bought it for me. I don't remember asking for it, but they got it for me. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to give it a listen and let's see what's up. I was too young to understand Purple Rain when it came out in 1984. I hated When Doves Cry. I didn't get it. I didn't get the art. I was too young. I was only, 10 or 11 years old. So I didn't get it yet, but I put on Sign of the Times, and the first track on that album is Sign of the Times, and it blew my mind.
In France, a skinny man died of a big disease with a little name. By chance, his girlfriend came across a needle, and soon she did the same. At home, there were 17-year-old boys, and their idea of fun is being in a gang called the Disciples, high on crack.
It was different. It was not glossy. It wasn't big. It was intimate. It was like Prince was singing directly into your ear. And the sound of the engineering on that album, it perfectly matches the colors of the album cover. It's brown and it's muted yellow. And it just felt very warm. And yet that first song, Sign of the Times, was so not warm, but warning. of, again, there's danger out there and you have to kind of watch yourself. You know, his brother dies of heroin, all this kind of stuff. Things are going wrong, and we have to figure out a way around it. And as much as I, spend my life creating comedy music and stand-up comedy and jokes, I love sad, dark songs. Absolutely love them. And the other thing that got me about that entire album was the sparseness of the arrangements in general. The engineering was so different from anything happening at the time. It wasn't a bunch of big gated snares and reverb and all this. It was sparse and it was intimate. And the whole album just shows such versatility. And that's something that I've always tried to capture in my own music, is like, I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. That album, it's got pop, it's got rock, it's got soul classics on it. I mean, it's just so much different stuff on that album that it just blew my mind open and made me, even though I was a rock kid for sure, definitely a metalhead, it made me feel free to go look other places and see what was out there in the world.
These are the songs I keep singing. Back in 1991, I wasn't having any fun till my roommate said, come on and put a brand new record on. Had a baby on.
So as we get into the next part about a song that I have attached to a moment or a time in my life when I figured out or decided who I wanted to be. It's a song that I don't even particularly like. I mean, it's a good song, but it's not my favorite song. But it was the song that popped into my head as I thought about this question, and that is AC/DC's Highway to Hell. I don't care if I ever hear Highway to Hell again. I never need to hear it again. Every sound guy thinks he needs to bring me up to stage with an AC/DC song, and half the time it's Highway to Hell. I don't know why. I actually have my own intro music now because I don't need to hear AC/DC's intro music ever again. But here's why I attach it to my decision to become a musician. It was the very first song that my band, Roadside Attraction, learned how to play in 1993, 94, something like that. When we gathered in my parents' living room with our, $150 guitars and our crummy little amps and some dudes we managed to put together to form a band. And we didn't have any songs yet, but we all knew Highway to Hell. And so we bashed that out for months until we sort of got our gear in gear to write some songs. And my poor parents had to hear Highway to Hell by this 22-year-old band in their living room for at least 6 months. And it was part of our show early on for a while. And we just played it because we knew how to play it. And we kept playing it over and over and over and over and over again. And I never need to hear Highway to Hell again. But it was that very formative time of, man, we're having 6-hour rehearsals on Sunday in my mom's living room. And we're going to be the biggest thing in the world. Yeah, well, anyway. The other song that I really attached to a decision to be who I wanted to be, and this is going to sound wildly self-serving, and if you think it is, I apologize. In 2004, I wrote a song called Whale Blubber.
I'd lie down in the rain, I'd swallow all the pain of 100,000 and butter breaths chomping at my brain. But would you eat whale blubber for me? I'd blow a grizzly bear. It's one of my own songs. There's the self-serving part. I honestly don't remember what else I was listening to in 2004. But at the time, I had broken up with my bandmates, and I was sitting in my studio just throwing down musical ideas, and there was some of them were funny, and the other guys had never wanted to do anything remotely funny. They were very serious, and I had this song called Whale Blubber, which was a parody of an 80s power ballad, which harkens back to all the other stuff. And it was a parody of the classic
it's in the key of G. It's going to use a C add 9 chord. The solo's going to be in E minor, like the whole deal. I even pulled like a Beatles thing at the end of it. And it was a love song that was derived from a line in the Jim Carrey film, Me, Myself, and Irene. And there's a point in the movie where he and his girl are sitting next to a lake, and one of them starts talking about moving to Alaska, and the other one, I can't remember which was which, and the other one goes, I would go with you. And they go, yes, but would you eat whale blubber for me? And my girlfriend and I, we kind of shot up and we went, oh my gosh, that's a song title. And I'd written the song Whale Blubber that I started throwing into some of my regular music gigs. I had started performing in coffee shops, doing little acoustic gigs here and there. And I started throwing it in there with a bunch of physical business. There was, a ridiculous guitar solo section and things like that. And people loved it. And I didn't know what to do about that. I had, I had that and a couple other little goofy songs, and I had to make a decision as to whether I was going to be a quote unquote serious songwriter or if I was going to pursue this comedy thing. And obviously I pursued the comedy thing, which has been, I can't even explain the impact that that's had on my life. It's been so great. But that was the moment when I wrote Whale Blubber. I think I became a comedian. And so as self-serving as that sounds, that is the song that made me not even figure out who I wanted to be. It made me have to make the decision as to who I was going to be in that moment. And that moment being a year, something like that. So Whale Blubber. And I feel like I feel like I can't let this go without mentioning Butch Walker. In particular, his song called Ladies and Gentlemen, the Let's Go Out Tonights. And the album, The Let's Go Out Tonights, came out in 2006. I was already into doing comedy. I was already a songwriter. I was already doing everything. And so I don't have a very specific, pinpointed reason for this pick. I don't know exactly what it was, but that song tweaked something in my brain that has made Butch Walker sort of an invisible mentor in my songwriting brain for almost 20 years now. And so I don't have it doesn't answer any of the questions, but I felt I couldn't let it go without bringing up that song in particular, Ladies and Gentlemen, the Let's Go Out Tonights, and Butch Walker in general, who's just an amazing songwriter. So the last part about my heart song, your most meaningful achievement or contribution, and I don't think I've created it yet. I hope I haven't created it yet, because that means I'm on the downslide. I think that there's always more to do. I also have no expectations of being remembered for what I do. Most people aren't remembered for what they do unless you hit a very large amount of people in that way. If you think back to the classical period, we remember Bach and Beethoven. We remember Chopin, Tchaikovsky. That's a small percentage. We remember a small percentage of the people that were making music 200 years ago or 300 years ago. So I have no thoughts about being remembered 300 years from now. The Beatles maybe will be remembered 300 years from now. And so all you can do is make an impact on the people around you now. And the things that I want to give to people now is I want to make them think. I want to make them explore life, explore the world. I want to make them laugh. And I hope they create things with those things that they're thinking and exploring and laughing about. And so I hope that's my contribution, is just to get people to think, explore, laugh, and create. And I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for Heart Songs, the podcast. If you'd like to be considered to be a guest in a future episode, please email the podcast at heartsongsthepodcast@gmail.com. See you next time.